let's do this. So, immobility, from the numbers we have, it's growing year on year. But there are a few things that we need to ensure that this narrative continues that way. Financing is critical. But for us to unlock financing, there are a few things that we need. And this is the part where you engage me. You already work in the companies that are in this sector. So if there's one thing that would unlock your business today, what would that be? That would be? What else? Yes, What else would you need? Or to credit need? I mean, the people from Watu want money. What else do we need? Capacity building. I know from Basigo would need policies that work for us. Anybody else? Yeah? Sorry? Okay. So, and that is why we are having this conversation today. We have people who have knowledge and have done research in terms of policy, and that's why Amos is having this conversation with us today. And we have a representative engineer, Oliech from Kenya Power, who will help us, or will let us know, do we build charging stations now? Is it, chicken, egg? Do we build before we have the demand? But before we start, I think I'll let my panelists start with some opening remarks. What do you think about this topic today?
Right. Good morning, everyone. Really happy to be part of this conversation, and I think it's a conversation that's in time. We have been scouting around growing the sector, but now this is the right time to advance. And I think it's a big place in history that we need now to scale. I think, Steve, you mentioned quite a number of companies that are operating the space, but this is the time to scale, and what we require to scale is financing. So just before I tell you what I think about it, I just would like to give a high-level introduction of WRI. So World Resources Institute is a research-based organization that's looking to intervene in people, climate, and nature. And the way we look at this is that we aspire to use research-based or evidence-based methodologies to impact three key systems, one of them being energy, and the second one being food, land, and water, and the last one being cities. So how we do this is in different ways, and as pertains to this discussion, I am here under the urban mobility work, which also encompasses e-mobility. So I think, again, I say this is a conversation that's in time, and we need to look at quite a number of elements. From WRI's perspective, we look at this as we need to step back and look at it as a system-wide or ecosystem-wide, to have an ecosystem-wide lens, so that we're looking at the whole value chain, the whole supply chain perspective, so that whatever it is that we are designating from the financing angle touches on all levels of the supply chain. So looking at the energy level for e-mobility, for example, and also looking at the vehicle, like the vehicle channel for the e-mobility, all the way to like the end-of-life management, and looking at also at the different aspects of this ecosystem in terms of how do we leverage on technology to support this and so much more. So I'm just starting off, but I guess we'll drill down more to more details. Yeah.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Engineer Joshua Oliech, representing KPLC. It's indeed my pleasure to be here, just having these conversations on this new space of e-mobility. And indeed, Kenya Power plays a significant role in the whole value chain, because if there's no power, then how do you even charge the EVs? So I think Kenya Power is excited to partner with all of us in this front. And we're really, really excited to have this conversation. So just hear out what are the challenges that you have insofar as grid and everything that goes with it is that package. Sometimes Kenya Power gets a lot of flack, even when I was being introduced. Thank you for putting that caveat. I know there could be even questions from upcountry there. but let's stick to EV today. If if there are any other issues, we will be willing to take them and see how to support. But let me just reiterate that KPLC is really, really excited in this new space. For us, it's a win-win situation because it's extra sales for us. And the bottom line is improving for us. So the more you guys come on board, the more KPLC also benefits. But I think at the bottom of it is to see how best we can give you this service in a reliable manner. You know, that when you need it, you get it. And that's why we are here just to represent KPLC. I was really excited when I got the invite just to come and just shed light on what we are doing in this space as KPLC. We have a section of a number of officers whom we have in KPLC just looking at the e-mobility. And we're excited to have these conversations. Thank you.
An engineer, when you still have a mic, what excites you the most about e-mobility today? And what do you think are the barriers that may cause that excitement to go down?
I think that's the change in how we do things, because it says that innovation makes things life better. Innovation makes things to move a little bit faster. Innovation probably sometimes can even reduce the cost of doing business. Yeah, and for us, we've seen it because we have quite a chunk of EV in our fleet today, about 60 of them. Out of a total fleet of about 2,500. So for us, we've seen the savings in those EVs so far, and I think it's a good space to have. We're still compiling the data on even the bigger fleet that we're still struggling with on issues of maintenance. I'm talking about the lorries and the bigger machines. But on the small two-wheelers, motorcycles and everything, I think the data is very, very encouraging that we want to even onboard all our motorcycles to EV. It's a good start as we progress. And for us as a utility, is just because we have this huge fleet, it's just getting people and getting companies to support us in terms of maintenance of those EVs. Still a new space. We're still struggling to see what is there in the market to assist us. But I think those will be my initial remarks in terms of this new space. Thank you.
What about you, Amos?
Great. I think, for me, the thing that most excites me is that I think, as Moses said, 3 years ago, we'd be very excited to see any electric vehicle around. The discussion, I think, dates back a few years before that. And I remember around 8 years ago, 2018, 2017, thereabout, we actually had the first sort of meetup discussing electric mobility, and it was a scale up from fuel economy. So how do we improve the fuel economy? And we are now looking at how to go to the most fuel economic vehicle, the electric vehicle. So seeing that from 8 years ago and seeing that it was a dream, and now seeing the reality of that dream come true, that most excites me. But that said, I think there are quite a number of barriers that still exist. Around 2 years ago, we did a study looking at the market, and some of the things that came up were, as we were mentioning here, the policy elements, regulatory elements. There was something around the technology, something around financing as well, something around the capacity and awareness, and let me stop it there. But basically, the thing is, if you look at it even from a macroeconomic level, there is elements that were also mentioned by Steve, like stability, predictability of the policy environment that has not been there, especially because of the finance acts that have to change every year. Such things, there's elements of fluctuations to the currency. What does that mean in terms of financing? That we discuss about risk, especially in financing, and that's a big question. So how do we de-risk this sector? It being very new, looking at the technology and how much it hasn't progressed so much. So there's a bit of hesitance from most of the financing institutions and so on. There's also the capacity and awareness, as we mentioned, that has been mentioned here. People have had, I always get shocked that at times we will interact with people in Nairobi, there's sort of an appreciation of electric mobility. But once you go just a bit out of Nairobi, there's a bit of confusion around electric mobility, and there's really a lot that we have to do around the capacity. So that's a very high level. I know we can drill down later on this.
I think still on policies and tariffs, and this is for you, Engineer Oliech, tariffs are still a very big factor in terms of that is currently affecting this industry. And my question to you is, how is Kenya Power working with other stakeholders to ensure that the kind of policing and the tariff structures that we come up with are still bankable, but also fair to the operators in this room?
All right, so thank you for that. I knew it was coming. Everyone wants to pay less. Let me say that that Kenya Power does not. Let me just make it clear. Kenya Power does not come up with those tariffs themselves. Actually, we have a regulator who regulates the kind of tariff. Today, the cost of fuel, the cost of paraffin is regulated by a regulator, IPRA. Same case to Kenya Power. Being a new space, we structured the current tariff on the basis of let's just see how this works. We looked, because we didn't have a basis, it's a new space, we didn't have a basis, and we looked at all the tariffs that we had, and the structure was made in such a way that it's attractive. I'll give you the numbers today. If you consume over probably 100 units in your house, you will pay about 20 shillings thereabout on per unit of electricity. If you go to do charging for EV, the EM tariff, that is e-mobility tariff, is at 16 shillings. That is peak. That is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. If you do that off peak, then it reduces by 50%. That is 8 shillings, way less than what you use in your house today. So that is a conversation that is going on. We are due for a review of the tariff towards the end of this current financial year, which ends in June. So in July of next year, we'll have new tariffs. But stakeholders and other players in the space are free to bring in their suggestions, to bring in their memorandum so that can be co-opted in the tariff that will be applied from the next financial year. So from our side, I think it's a very good start in terms of the e-mobility space and the tariff that we charge at the moment. But conversation can happen from the different stakeholders as we move into the next financial year. So I think for now, for me, it looks fair from where I sit. Thank you.
So are we saying that now that we have the numbers, we should anticipate something that reflects what the industry demands are? Is that what we are saying from a KPLC perspective?
Say that again?
So now that we have the numbers, and EMAK would give the numbers on how the consumption has been, are we saying that that is one of the considerations that KPLC will use, KPLC and EPRA will use in the coming up of the next tariff?
Of course, the feedback from the stakeholders is a key part in our considerations. But remember, KPLC is in business, just like every one of us is in business. Remember, with the unbundling of the energy sector, forming the different categories of players in the energy sector, from generation to transmission, that is KETRACO, and the distribution, Kenya Power, and of course REDEC and retail for KPLC. There is a lot of cost that is carried all along up to the power is applied to KPLC. KPLC does the last mile to retail that power to the customer. So it's a balance of those things. You need to look at your expenses and you need to look at the markup and come up with a tariff. But I said the feedback from EMAK and other players will be important during that discussion when you're approaching the review, so that all the aspects can be considered.
So Amos, let's talk about policy. From WRI's perspective, what kind of policies would make Kenya's e-mobility space, would make investors have more confidence in the Kenya's e-mobility space?
Right. That's a very broad question, and I think all of us have a bit of info on different elements. But I guess one of the things that stands out for us is that we actually are progressing in this. Sorry. In the space, because some months ago we did not have any semblance of an e-mobility policy, but now we have had actually a very consultative process, looking at the industry and having an overarching e-mobility policy and an implementation framework towards that end. And I think I like the way, in as much as we have not gone the full circle in terms of having the policy out, I like the way that the implementation framework has different like areas of intervention, looking at the policy, looking at the manufacturing, looking at the education, looking at the financing, both looking at the fiscal and non-fiscal measures and all that. So I think that's a very good start. Comparing Kenya to other countries, I think one of the things that we really need to fine-tune is what our focus is as a country. Kenya is a very unique country in that most of the advancements in sectors are largely market-driven. So how does the government, actually for most of the cases, government has to do catch up to the market. So how do we already tap into what is happening in the industry and provide an enabling framework that supports the growth of that industry? So I think we are at a good level, that we have come up with an e-mobility policy that's overarching, but then also the drill down into the different implementation framework working groups will be best to drill down to the different parts of the value chain. Yeah.
And for you, Engineer Oliech, as the demand grows, most of the operators in this room are going into infrastructure bit, so more charging stations. And from a KPLC's perspective, how are you working with other stakeholders to streamline the approvals process to make that a little bit easier for operators?
Well, operators in terms of the chargers and all right. For us, we have made the process a bit easy for the operators who are coming into this space in terms of putting in their EV chargers and stations. But the challenge I think that we're having is that probably there are people who are not aware, and then the declaration is not made at application level. Because if you don't declare that you're doing an EV charging station, then you will be categorized like any other, either domestic or a commercial customer. So it's important that during the application process, that is declared so that you can benefit thereof from the reduced tariffs that I talked about, the off-peaks and then the peak at 16 shillings. So it's important that people are doing that. We have officers that we've stationed. Apart from the section that I've talked about, we have an officer stationed that can invest, just to walk through investors, people who are coming in with various ideas, including the e-mobility, just to walk them through the processes so that you get it at the first step of application so that you get the benefits thereof. So a number of initiatives Kenya Power is doing so that as investors come are aware that these are the channels that they need to take, and these are the benefits that will come once they follow that channel.
And I think you're speaking to declarations, to data, giving as much data as possible. When you're setting up any kind of station, if you're coming to set shop here, give as much data as possible so that KPLC then becomes a partner rather than... is that what you say?
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. As you come, make your declaration as you start. KPLC is here as an enabler because most of the people in this space are investors and doing business. KPLC will want to make that journey as smooth as possible. And that's why it's important that we even put officers in different other offices so that they can get the investors as they come to make inquiries, so that the journey might be not as difficult. Yeah.
And speaking of data, Amos, what data gaps, in your perspective, are most critical in convincing financiers that Kenya e-mobility space is ready to absorb more scale or more investment?
I think that sort of goes into different levels. So I'll start off by the wider one. That's actually, public facing. So Carol mentioned that you're going to be discussing later about the observatory and looking at the data and all that. So I think that's a good one. It's a good initiative that we'll be having out there that can actually show, as Steve was proposing, elements of financial absorption, absorption of loans and how much of capital is flowing towards Kenya. I think we need to position ourselves as a country or a market that is already at the level of scaling. So data like around how much of vehicles are going out there, looking at the financing level as well, looking at how much we are able to get from the local banks, as well as the MFIs and that intermediary level. It would be very important to show the market as a market that is ready. One of the things that I guess Moses also mentioned is that we have this semblance of there's a lot of money somewhere, but there's also a lot of need somewhere. So how do we bridge this gap? And I think the idea is I think it's beyond the data really, but more of how do we show that the risk is being distributed elsewhere, so that we can be able to attract this kind of financing.
So what gaps in your perspective exist from the data that we already have?
Yeah. So again, I think that's a bit of a hard one for me to answer in a ballpark way, and I think we'll get the information from the crowd. Mm-hmm. I think all of us, as it had been mentioned earlier, there's a lot of crowd here from the financing perspective, but data like around, I would say one of the things that is already also coming up is the consumption that would come from energy. How much of this sector is strong enough to cause a tip. And I think I like the way we say that we already starting to see those kind of data coming up in the April report, specifying that this amount of energy has gone to electrification, but then there's a lot that gets lost in the home charging. So how do we capture such kind of data? On the bank side, so we have the MFIs that actually disburse the funds to the 2 and 3 wheelers, for example. But how accessible is that data to everyone else to show how big a market this is? Elements like that. So I would like us to drill down this in the dialogue phase of this engagement, because I think the knowledge is out here that would help us to unlock the finance.
So that means that we are coming to you, the audience, because we need some data. So my question to the people in this room is, what is the biggest regulatory bottleneck you have faced so far when deploying your e-mobility solution in this country? Anyone? You guys must be pretty successful, yeah? We are doing so well. We are, aren't we? Anyone who's facing challenges? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think one of the biggest challenges we are facing, not because we are investing in this, but as government, and what I see, there is less information. We do not have adequate information in regard to e-mobility. Number two, we have weak policy in terms of implementation of this e-mobility. And what we'll be seeking is support so that all government agencies that are involved can come up with the right policies and regulations to ease this burden of implementation. Thank you.
I think people are shy to say what they are struggling with. Anyway, I think and to echo what you're saying, one of the biggest challenges sitting on this side is, and I'm sorry to categorize as government is government, and all of you guys operate completely separately. Yeah. So you will go to one agency, and they'll tell you they require this from the next agency, and that agency does not speak to the next one. So you're having to deal with. I'll just give you an example. You go to the county, they need an object, they need something from NEMA. You go to NEMA, they'll need it from EPRA. You go to EPRA, they say they need something back from the county. Now, so you're in this permanent merry-go-round. And then sometimes you get all that, but the guy who comes to inspect on the ground has no clue about all the other things that have been listed. So sometimes I think it's very difficult when you're trying to build, especially like infrastructure, where the inspector on the ground says has one set of information, but what's on paper is completely very different. So that's a big challenge that we face. And now when I have the mic, I will throw a question to my good friend from Kenya Power. If I buy an EV, can I get a meter so that I can be able to enjoy the e-mobility tariff when my car is parked outside at night and help you take up that nighttime power?
Yeah, hi. My name is George. I'm from Practical Action. So from a policy perspective, so just interesting perspectives. We had a meeting in Naivasha last week where we organized 10 counties to come and discuss on that question. Because the conversation has been more of national. So, and most of the players here are focused on Nairobi. So we had 10 counties, also Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Nakuru. And I think from the county perspective was that, number one, even framework in terms of charging. I think Nairobi is the only one right now which is attempting to come up with a public charging framework. Secondly, also, all these counties are doing their spatial planning. They are doing their county energy plans, but none of those key documents, even in their CADP and also in the internal documents, none of these counties include e-mobility in their planning. So if you go to the spatial plans, you go to the transport kind of planning. So from a policy perspective, I think also it's good to really, all these conversations, remember that the players now are moving into the counties. So can the conversation also be happening and also that technical assistance be happening to the counties? Thanks.
Morning all. Joe here from Arc Ride. I think it's a bit of an unfair question because we could be here for the whole day complaining about the challenges we face. But I think one of the biggest things for me over the last 4 years investing in this space has been the fact that annually we're worried that the government's going to remove the incentives or lack of incentives for e-mobility. And this annual budgeting fight from an investment point of view is really destabilizing for choosing whether you invest in Kenya or another country. Other regional countries are much further ahead of saying, look, with e-mobility, we're going to do a 5-year strategy, zero duty, let's make this happen. Kenya has turned it into an annual mess. So that's probably one of the biggest fundamental challenges we're faced. I can probably list about another 47 issues, but we'll save those for later in the day.
Good morning. My name is Mwangi. I come from Swiss Contact. It's an international NGO. We are new in the space, and we are looking at unlocking capital, which is more or less like the buzzword I've had today, and policy reforms as well. So for me, this comment is from a point of observation, and we may be trying to increase the number of EVs in the country, but the infrastructure remains the same. So if we are trying to enable, say, for example, the youth or anyone who is commuting to work to actually cycle to work, is there a bike track or in Nairobi or even outside Nairobi that someone can actually feel safe while using their two-wheeler? Are you certain that there would be a charging station wherever you work to actually charge your EV to work. Yeah, so as the gentleman said, there are very many possible barriers, but I'm looking forward to the solutions that emanate from this roundtable. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So, my name is Levi. I'm from Equator Mobility. So we lease electric vehicles, four-wheelers in this space. So one of our biggest bottlenecks is still around policy. So the policies right now, especially when we are purchasing these cars, you find the duties are still quite high. So bringing in the cars, even if we have excise duty, what are they called? Cuts, you still find that the cost of the capex is still high because of the high regulations. Almost 60% to 80% of tax, especially on four-wheelers. So this is one of the bottlenecks that we face, and how can the government go that extra mile to help us in this? Another one would be information. For example, not proud to say that I've learned about the electric mobility policy. I was not too aware about it. So I think we need more information from stakeholders such as KPLC, and I think EMAK is doing a great job at spreading the information both to end users and to guys such as ourselves who are in the industry. So information gaps and policy bottlenecks, those are my two biggest ones. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Caleb Okumu from Advanced Mobility Center. So mine, looking at the personnel we have around, I'm not seeing anybody from security sector, because this is a very key sector in handling both EV and other sectors. Now, we have challenges with especially motorbikes being stolen. Now, how are we going to sort out this? Is it within the policies of EMAK, or it belongs to another sector? Because you'll understand it even from the agencies like we have WATU and all that. They're losing a lot of bikes, even Mogo and other sectors. So now you find the bikes are getting lost. And the borders, especially the borders, are porous. So how are we going to tackle this? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Judith from Accra. I would love to ask my friend from KPLC. We are grateful for the e-mobility tariff, but my biggest challenge with the tariff is the application process. It's very tedious. Is there a way that you can create a department in the KPLC to focus on e-mobility tariff application process, make it seamless for EMAK partners, and also the metering bureaucracy is really tedious. Like, you can apply for so many sites, but to be honest, to be transformed to e-mobility takes a lot of time. Yeah.
Okay, good morning. My name is Joseph from ICM, Intercorridor Mobility. And I want to look from the perspective where I come from, the public transport, the matatu industry. I have experienced two challenges. One is with the government, both county and national, from Namata and the county government. When I sat with the Director of Transport of Nairobi County, they told me this thing is too big for them. It's the time now they are preparing the framework to map out the city on specific common charging locations where now people can invest. So it is not there. You look at Thika Road, which is a serious corridor. You tell me how many charging stations that can accommodate that place and how many vehicles we can use that. On the other side is a conversation that the government has always kept talking about the climate change, which I've never understood whether they are serious on it, because in our industry, the matatu industry, we are the biggest, almost the biggest emitters of carbon. And you can look at how we have appreciated the e-mobility through Basigo and other companies to take up the electric buses with a view to ensure that at least by 30% of the buses in the city are electric. But you look at that and how the government is intensifying the companies to do that, it is very, very minimal. We want to invest in it. There are so many investors who want to partner with public transport companies to ensure we have clean corridors in terms of air emissions. But the government is not coming through. You even look at how to import even just one bus, 20 million shillings. Who will risk that money? The other aspect is the financing sector. I've gone to so many banks. I've gone and presented our proposal, presented our vision on it. But one question the banks keep asking us, the risk is too high. How will you mitigate it? How can we finance you 100 buses, one costing 20 million, that is 2 billion. How will you return it? So even with the e-mobility policy and the incentives that the government had placed in there, we can't even fill them. Now you look at what KVM is doing. The buses that are being assembled at KVM and look at the demand of the market, it is nothing. So the government must come in and completely zero rate imports of importing a bus so that by the time, maybe 2 years' time, we can have companies now investing on better assembly factories in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Wakaba, representing BEB. My question is there's one concern. User engagement and EV is still a major gap, right? If you take an EV, stop it on the street, people will start interacting with it. And that's one of the solutions that we want to create away from Nairobi. For example, what we've been doing as a user group is basically take EVs to the remotest part, Meru, Timau, Nanyuki, Kisii. Once people interact with these vehicles, they'll definitely start taking them. And we have testimonies. So as a solution, let's again move away from Nairobi. We'll focus on Nairobi. Once we start moving away from Nairobi, then we'll see that uptake happening. Because information gap is there. And Kenyans are like Thomases. They have to see, to believe, and to accept. Okay.
And the reason I ask that question is because when we have forums like this, it's important for us to take stock of how far we've come. 3 years ago, I'm sure if we had asked this question, trust would have been a big one. The fact that the users to whom we are deploying these solutions do not trust the product. I know with Basigo, we had that problem for quite a while. And we even had problems with people thinking that they'd get electrocuted if it rained and they were in the bus. So it's important for us to take stock and to see how far we have come, even as we unearth the now emerging, quote unquote, problems that now we have. And this is where Amos tells us, is there a best practice from other countries to ensure that the problems you are facing, other countries who have done it and have addressed the problems that we are currently facing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yeah, the good thing about this is that we're not the first ones in this. And we have a lot of learnings that we can borrow from other countries. So WRA has a presence in quite a number of countries around the world. And some of the ones that I would pick out that have really gone ahead of us in terms of electrifications are like the really advanced one, China, as well as India. And we can have some relatable ones across the continent. So across all the countries that have really advanced, what we see is that they have a long-term thinking about the sector. So given, for example, the issue that has just been raised right now, the policy predictability is not an issue there because they have a long-term view of how they would like to grow the sector. And connected to that, they have actually used a lot of modeling to see if, for example, we provide production-linked incentives, how this would affect the macroeconomic situation, how this would in fact affect the fiscal space. And I know one of the things that we hold back as Kenya, especially from the government side, is the thought of revenue loss. So how do we, these other countries have actually projected ahead to see that, yes, we will provide this kind of incentive, maybe fiscal or non-fiscal, but this is what it's going to have an impact in terms of our economy. So I see a lot of that. There's a lot of streamlining of processes, like the permitting processes, for example, for charging infrastructure. There's a lot of streamlining of that. For those, and then there's also some elements of concessionality that they introduce, especially from our neighbor Rwanda, where they actually have provided rent-free land for companies that are investing in mobility. The uptake of that is a bit questionable right now, but the fact that the government has gone ahead to provide that as an option, I think really provides an impetus for most companies that are considering setting up or growing to actually advance. So I see a lot of the FAME scheme, in the India production-linked incentives, issues about market-based mechanisms, where actually you're disincentivizing the ICE vehicles, but also incentivizing the EVs. So a lot of that, and I think, again, I will take a step back and say we have to have a forethought, think ahead, 5 years, 10 years, so that there's actually some stability and predictability across the space. Yep.
Excuse me 1 minute. I'd like to interrupt to just allow our other speaker who's already joined us, Madame Agnoma Kone, kindly come onto the stage. Clapping, this walk of fame is not a joke, is not a joke, especially when she has to explain. Welcome, welcome. No, not really.
Thank you. No, you do not have to explain, but maybe you can start by telling us what excites you most about e-mobility today.
All right. Just before I start, I'm Nanyuma Kone, and I am from the Global Green Growth Institute. It's an intergovernmental organization that is based in Seoul, South Korea. So I think that's already a keyword, e-mobility. The technology that comes from South Korea when you're talking about e-mobility is A-class. And one of the things we've been trying to do at the Global Green Growth Institute, specifically in Kenya, whereby we have been working with the Ministry of Transport to look at the enabling environment that is needed to allow the effective uptake of e-mobility. But first, to do that, we didn't really go to the financial mechanisms. We always look at the architecture, the platform, the enabling environment that has to be sustainable and stable enough to ensure uptake is going to be sustainable, effective. But in countries such as Cote d'Ivoire and also, surprisingly, in Togo and in Rwanda, which was just mentioned, we did support them with the policy framework. And you will see in places like Cote d'Ivoire, e-buses are already on the place. And what we did is that we just don't focus on the enabling environment. One of the things that has to be done is demystify e-mobility. A lot of perception that is sometimes negative, but that negative perception is not because people consider e-mobility as something detrimental. It is the lack of knowledge. And once we start by building capacity, and to not only build capacity, but also ensuring we have TVET centers, that is instrumental. It's not just the theoretical aspect that is important, it is the practical. And we've seen that in Togo and in Cote d'Ivoire have been very effective in really expediting the uptake of e-mobility. So what excites me is that if we have the right enabling environment, coupled together with the right physical policies and instruments, as well as the right mechanisms in terms of subsidies from the government, because subsidies will be needed to ensure that people are incentivized, then I think uptake of e-mobility in Kenya and other regions will be very fast. Yeah, thank you.
And still on that, you mentioned something quite interesting in terms of what could be done. Who is responsible for that? Who should take up that responsibility to ensure that we are at par with Togo and the countries that you've mentioned? Who should take responsibility?
In Kenya, I think the first responsibility is government. For anything to be effective and efficient and even sustainable, the first thing is really the groundwork and the foundation. And if that is not effective, there's no way that the public or even the public will be able to uptake and have a positive overview of e-mobility. You just mentioned some people think that if they get into the bus, but the only institution that can actually demystify that or really catalyze the demystification of that is the government. The second one is that why again government? Because the government needs to provide that effective platform for the private sector to be able to develop de-risking mechanisms that will enable maybe entrepreneurs who are most of the time the clients of EV to be able to uptake that. So there is a layer to that. But if you look at the core of that, I would say the government has a huge responsibility. The policy framework, the enabling framework, the financial platform that has to be available to ensure that de-risking mechanisms are effective and efficient is instrumental for success. So I'm going to say government. Thank you.
This is where I come back to you, my audience. If you were to ask the government for only one reform to unlock your business, what would that be? Just one.
My name is Jero, the Hema Microlink. What we would ask the government to do is this: make a policy that is long-term. And we do not need a policy that if this business grows, then you need to increase taxes on it. So if it's 20 years, let's have 20 years, so that the investor can know in 20 years, I will break even. You know? But not after 2 years, the same government comes back and increases the taxes on what they had already reduced taxes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EMAK, the organizers of this event. Unfortunately, I am part of the government that you are asking questions. I have been very quiet. I have been very observant, and I think I need to move a step ahead. So now for the record, my name is Wanyama. I come from the Ministry of Transport. Thank you. So, Africa, to be honest, we are privileged that Kenya has the first ever globally researched electric mobility policy. We developed the electric mobility policy, and it was ready by last year, 2024, in August. But then we asked ourselves questions: how many policies have been developed by the government or governments in Africa and then put in the offices in the shelves? And so we agreed that we will have to do two things. One, to develop a comprehensive implementation strategy. The policy speaks to 7 objectives. And of course, as a country, we have walked this journey. You can see previous speakers have spoken about the Kenya National Climate Change Action Plan, the Integrated National Transport Policy, the international treaties that the country has signed and nothing has taken off. But I tell you, all these things, when you put them together, they speak to one thing. And because it is a research-driven, we understand that by 2015, the transport sector would emit over about 13% of the greenhouse gas emission to the environment. But this has poses poses a bigger threat that by 2030 maybe we'll have above 17%. So all these things put together, informed, plus, of course, the bottom-up economic agenda. This is the president's pet project. So why have we not launched the policy? It is because we are waiting for His Excellency the President to give us a specific date, because he promised to get involved in the launch by himself. And we are also happy to announce today that for people who did not have this information, this policy that we developed, a multi-sectoral task force was set up, and yours truly, the president of EMAK, Hesbon Mose, was part of this task force that developed the National Electric Mobility Policy. So you can be sure that having that kind of brain on board, we will not go wrong as a country. So let me just speak to three or one more thing. So this implementation strategy has involved us to form 5 technical working groups. They are multi-sectoral. Technical working group number 1 is going to focus on fiscal and non-fiscal measures of the policy. And now this will be led by the National Treasury. 40% of your conversation about taxes, duty, everything else will be settled by this group. The next group is about local manufacturing and assembling. Right now, you see manufacturers will tell you that they're actually enjoying a number of reliefs from the National Treasury, while importing especially completely knocked down parts, because we want to encourage local manufacturing and assembling. And there is another specific group that is going to talk about charging infrastructure and grid integration. This will be led by the Ministry of Energy and, of course, our counterparts from the KPLC and other relevant stakeholders. They are all put there to just speak to how better can we integrate energy so that we do not have issues of people complaining about power and things like that. Research is going to be undertaken by the Ministry of Education. Now, under this research, I'm happy to also report here that the German corporation, actually the German corporation has given us a lot of support as government and the Ministry of Transport. They helped us to onboard an international consultant from the Cities Forum and another local consultant, now together working with the task force and the technical team drawn from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We were able to realize and achieve the research-driven national electric mobility policy. So on the part of skilling and research, German Corporation is working together with the Ministry of Education, Research, and TVET, and they are developing even a curriculum for electric mobility issues to be taken care of at the TVET institutions. The last one is about, of course, policy and regulatory framework. This will now be addressing, of course, emerging issues. But once we already have a policy, we should be able to move on swiftly. One more thing. What has the government done to upscale or encourage uptake of electric mobility? We have a very popular program known as the Government Transport Procurement. Usually the government hires vehicles for different offices for a period of 3 years. And there is a proposal and which came to our desk through the Ministry of Transport. We worked together with the State Department for Transport and the State Department for Roads, Mechanical Department, and we developed specifications for SUV electric vehicles for government procurement. I am hoping this program will be through maybe from August, from around October, November. I'm sure we'll have over 3,000 fleet of vehicles that will be completely EV, just to lead by example. So this, there will be, I think, they'll be sent to regional government offices. So that means, of course, there'll be an accompaniment of charging infrastructure and things like that. I can also speak about a dozen questions we have received in all forums we have attended. what does the policy speak about over-reliance of the fuel levy? That if the government is going on this hand to lose money, where are we going to get money to repair our roads? So it's also a question that we have answered. And now I want to also happily report to you that we have engaged WRI, our development partners, and they're going to help us to run a study on the road maintenance levy so that we do not look like we do not have a strategy of we are losing here and we don't have a strategy of maintaining our roads. But of course, this is not something that we will experience as a country immediately, but of course, maybe from around 2040, 2037. So I'm sure in the middle here, we can be able to manage ourselves. Thank you very much for coming here. Thank you very much for the private sector taking a lead in all this. And of course, you understand the role of government is to just provide a regulatory framework to enable you to do business, which we have done. What we are waiting is just a specific date to launch the policy. And of course, all of you will be invited by EMAK because we don't have the contacts to get to all of you, but I'm sure we want to help, we want to invite you so that you can be part of that celebration, and then the policy will be out. We have already prepared what we call a sessional paper. It is already in Parliament. We're just waiting for the President to give us a date, and then all this will be done. Have I answered any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. And policy predictability has been highlighted as a thorn in the flesh. How realistic is it to reform that in the next 1-2 years?
Check. So yeah, I think it is very realistic, and I guess I'll speak and sound like a resounding gong, just saying that we need to actually have an informed policy direction. So what does that mean? We talked about earlier about modeling how elements in the different areas of the sector would look like. And I think it is possible. Maybe we might have missed the train for the next finance bill, but I think there's hope in the next 2 years to be in a position where we can confidently say that this is how we shall proceed. And I think Justo has mentioned that we will be supporting the government to look at the road maintenance levy fund. But that's just one element. There's so many other. So how do we, like for example, position ourselves, and engineer, this may be your response, how do you position yourself so that when Basigo or Rome are trying to establish a charging infrastructure in Kiambu, that it's actually fast-tracked, because that has a lot of consequence to even accessing finance, even reducing the risk profile of this company, the industry company. So there seems to be, I see a lot of low-hanging fruit. We just need to go and not delay. And someone would say, because of the political environment, in 2027, things will change. What happens? So I think that's where we still need to step back and say, as a country, regardless of who's the sitting authority, that this is the direction we'll be taking, and so follow through.
And my final question is to you, Ms. Kone. From your perspective, what types of financial instruments or partnerships are most urgent right now to unlock private capital for Kenya's e-mobility sector? Ms. Kone, that's for you. Yes.
I thought that was his question. So if I understood the question correctly, what kind of partnership as well as the financial instruments that are needed? Okay, I think that's a tough question, right? Because there are different stakeholders that when you look at the value chain, you cannot say one is more important than the other. So each one of them actually needs to have a risk profile. I think once the risk profile is developed, it's better either to match which kind of financial instrument will be more effective, if it's for the manufacturers, the consumers, or even for people who actually supply. So each one of them has different criteria that are needed. Each one of them has different needs that are supposed to be explored before the finance is actually either allocated to them. But in terms of partnerships, so I think all forms of partnerships are important. You cannot say one is better than the other. But I think the strongest partnership that is really relevant, is that me? All right, it's not me. So I think the most crucial partnership that is relevant is actually the partnership between the government and the private sector. And I think that at the local level, just going beyond, thank you. So if we are going to cascade that to the local level, because I think that's really important, a lot of the time, especially in the context of Africa, we love the big things. But the big things are great when the smaller things at the bottom have already formed a very solid base to pick up everything. So for partnership, the most crucial will be the relationship between the government and the private sector to be able and the private sector to have effective PPP models when it comes to e-mobility. And what does that do? That even helps in catalyzing finance, because that's what you want. You don't want to mobilize. Kenya is beyond mobilizing. You've heard from the government, you're not in catalyzing. You need to actually expedite the rate at which you get these resources, disperse these resources, and have the maximum impact that you can have. So for that to be effective, that PPP model, that needs to be the first thing. Everything else can come afterwards. Thank you.
Asante. So I have 10 minutes that I would like to donate to you, my audience, to ask any questions that you have. 10 minutes. Any question?
All right. Let me take part of the 10 minutes to answer the two questions that were asked by Moses. The issue of having a meter at home, yeah, it's an interesting ask. Technically, there will be nothing much. Remember the days of old where you have the main meter and you'll have a second meter for water heating. Remember those days? Yeah, you'll have a second meter for water heating because of the different tariffs. Yeah, it's doable, it's practical. The only thing that from Kenya Power's perspective we'll be trying to grapple with is that at night when you're enjoying the 8 shilling tariff, how sure are we you are not powering the other loads? Yeah, you know, because for us it will be a huge loss from 20 shillings to 8 shillings. I think for us that will be something that we may need to find out. How do you ensure that your second meter is specifically for charging? And knowing Kenyans with their peculiar habits, I'm not too sure whether that will be strictly done that way. And then the other issue was about the application process, and we get to hear this so much, that our application process is long and winding. We appreciate that part. One of the things that we have done as an organization is to scale the customer-facing staff. We've done quite a bit of training and engaging new staff so that the process becomes a bit easy. The second thing that we've done is to automate the application process. Today, if you want an application, you can do it at the comfort of your home and get a reference number. With that reference number, then it becomes very, very easy to really follow up. Thirdly, about information sharing. Recently, we did an e-mobility conference. Maggie, confirm, was it this year or last year? This year. We did an e-mobility conference, as this was spearheaded by KPLC, just to share information and share our processes and just have a discussion on that space so that customers and investors are aware of our role as KPLC in that space. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you. My name is Faith Waraki, Green Women Youth in STEM E-Mobility Network. My question to Mr. Oliech and the team here. what part of the policy that is actually looking at accelerating conversations within our talent pipeline, which are our youths. We all know that we cannot keep waiting for the curriculum to be developed and to be rolled out in our learning institutions. We totally know that the e-mobility space, even a curriculum that was there 2 years ago, can no longer fit. So I still feel there's a huge gap. All we are still burying our head into the deep sand when it comes to our youth participation. If we are looking at really building a talent pipeline for our youths, our girls and our women, then we need to change this narrative and move it out of the boardrooms, out of these conference halls, into the action, hands-on, physical areas where the community is going to be in touch with the conversations. Because through that is the only way every other part of our nation will really understand that this conversation does not belong to the boardroom members or for every invitees or anyone else that has to drive into a hotel or take a cab to a hotel. Really, there's a huge disconnect. And I pray and I hope that from this conversation, we will have a part of a policy that is looking at that. And we are here with information. We are willing to give back that information and share the modalities that we can use to really change this narrative, because there is still a very huge gap. The talent pipeline we are looking into onboarding into this still do not understand what e-mobility is all about, unfortunately. Thank you.
My name is Joan Kubai. I work at Jacob's Ladder Africa, and mine is a comment to Faith. She's raised a very pertinent issue in terms of workforce development for the e-mobility sector and other upcoming sectors in the green economy. And I can tell you from experience, we are on the ground. We have an advocacy program towards green jobs, and we had an activation in Kisii, and we had a room of over 800 students, and none have ever seen an electric boarder, never seen an electric car, never ridden one. And so it was almost like you are speaking to people who don't know what you're talking about, and these are students in university, not TVET, not high school. And so it raises the question of, are we also thinking about the consumer base? Because we are also at a stage where the youth are the largest population in most African countries. They are going to be your consumers in the next couple of years. If they have no awareness, what are we doing to resolve that? And I think for Jacob's Ladder Africa, that's something that's a priority for us, that even as we are moving the sector ahead, we're not leaving young people behind, either as your future employees or your future consumers. And so I'd also want to hear in the room if that's something we're thinking about actively.
We'll answer that because we are currently doing that at Basigo. So we are open to receiving students who are coming for academic visits. We encourage them to write letters to tell us that they are coming, and we will have someone at our depot, at our service station, waiting for them. We'll happily give them an hour, 2 hours of our time to take them through what we are doing as a company. And I'd invite other players in this room to have programs such as those to ensure that in 5-10 years, the people who have the ability to keep us in business know exactly what we are about. And with that, that brings us to the end of this panel. Thank you for being an engaging audience. Thank you to my panelists for taking all the shots with grace and answering all questions. Asanteni sana. I hope this has been worth your while.